All right. Welcome back, everyone, to yet another installment in what is now apparently a reoccurring series on this channel, where I rate the hot takes you guys have about the Super Mario Brothers franchise. You guys seem to like the last one, and I figured it'd been enough time to the point where I'm like, yeah, I can do another one. So I put out a community post. You guys responded quite well. I don't really see a reason to drag this intro on any further. We're just gonna kind of go ahead and get into it. Like but last time, there's no script. This is just me rambling without any like forethought behind it. So yeah, I think we can just go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and dive right in. First one, Mario Party is better than Mario Kart. Love Mario Kart, but something about Mario Party's unpredictability makes it more interesting to me. It's why it's my favorite Mario spin-off. This one's interesting, actually. I've never really thought about which one's my favorite or which one I like between the two of them. Probably, if you were to point a gun to my head, probably Mario Kart. I just love there's just something about Mario Kart that's just really fun. I like all the colorful tracks and stuff and the bigger cast of characters it normally has compared to Mario Party. And, you know, there's like a decent skill level. There's like a, you know, you can consistently improve your skill at any given game where you're completing courses in like 0.2 seconds. I've seen some speedruns, they're freaking insane. But I've always liked Mario Party. I feel like Mario Party is better if you just want like... I was going to say if you wanted a more casual experience with friends, but both of these games can ruin friendship, so you can't really argue one over the other in that regard. But I like both quite a lot. I can see why someone would like the sort of unpredictability and sort of like board game aspects of the Mario Party franchise. I have a friend who absolutely adores the Mario Party franchise and gets me to play them all the time. But yeah, I mean, I can understand this one. I don't know if I entirely agree with like liking Mario Party more than Mario Kart, but I don't know. I love them both so much. It's kind of hard for me to like pick between the two of them, you know? The Mario movies hate is understandable, but overblown. I think they're genuinely good, especially the first one. They're not masterpieces, but they're still a fun ride. I think you're kind of preaching to the wrong choir with this one. I don't hate the Mario movies. I think they're kind of like this comment says. It says, you know, they're just fun, kind of nostalgia-filled rides, but... You know, as someone who spends a lot of his time on YouTube talking about how these characters in this world have a lot more going on under the surface than just like the funny wahoo shenanigans, it's kind of unfortunate to see the movies, which theoretically would have more opportunities to give these characters in this world kind of like deeper, you know, storytelling and theming and stuff, and just have it be exactly what people say the Mario games are all the time without really considering other aspects of the franchise. And, you know, if that's what you wanted from it and that's what you got out of it, then that's totally fine. But for me personally, as someone who kind of finds enjoyment in kind of deeper storytelling, I was very disappointed by, especially the second one. The first one I was able to excuse because it very clearly wasn't trying to tell any deeper story. It was just trying to be a prologue so that they can continue to tell these sequels and tell these stories. But with the Galaxy movie, it felt like it was actually trying to tell a deeper story and have a stronger emotional core, but it also felt like they gave up halfway because they didn't feel like trying anymore. And that was very frustrating to me, especially since the things that we did get that were on brand and were very in character for a lot of the cast were genuinely really fun and really good scenes. Like I've talked about this at multiple times. I love the freaking scene towards the end where Mario slams the gate behind Peach and tells her to run. I think that's top tier Mario and Peach chemistry. I think that's top tier Mario characterization, and unfortunately that was very few and far between, and it just kind of led to the entire thing feeling very hollow for me, especially once I realized that it was just kind of nostalgia bait, which, you know, if that's the kind of thing that you like, that's fine. But, you know, as someone who kind of was expecting a little and hoping for a little bit more, I was very let down, especially since we've seen it done multiple times by other franchises, and both in the gaming industry and just general high profile IPs in general, like Spider-Man and Sonic. You know, I can understand people being frustrated by critics treating this like it's the worst movies ever. They're not. They're not even the worst video game movies ever. It's kind of hard to reach that pedestal, you know, but they're just kind of okay movies. If you like them more, then that's good for you. I'm happy for you. I just, you know, I expected and hoped for a little bit more. Mario Sunshine has the best movement. It's just the levels that are bad. This one's interesting. I played Sunshine when the 3-pack 3D All-Stars came out, right? I had never played Sunshine. I had never played any of those three Mario games when they released that 3D All-Stars bundle. Fake fan, I know. But when I played Sunshine, I had no idea that people didn't like it. I was very surprised because I remember really enjoying it. I liked the flood mechanics. I thought the tropical sort of area, like Delfino Plaza as a whole, is like one of my favorite locations in Mario. I didn't know that people didn't like the level designs or didn't like certain aspects of it. I thought it was just totally fine, fun, good game. I didn't realize that people looked down upon it as like the black sheep of Mario 3D games. Like I just thought it was very good game. I don't understand what the hate is about it. But also, I kind of stay out of the loop when it comes to like the sort of deeper Mario community and the opinions on games. Because, from my understanding, from my perspective, I can't think of a bad mainline Mario platforming game post Mario 64, right? Like Mario 64 kind of like set the bar, and then it just like kept going, and it never like fumbled, at least in my opinion. But yeah, I had no idea that Sunshine was like frowned upon in certain circles. So that's interesting to me. I agree with this in that its movement is good. I don't even know if the levels were that bad. I remember there were a few that I got like frustrated with, but like there's always at least like one or two Mario levels that I get frustrated with in any given game. But yeah, this is just a good take. For me personally, I do not like the idea of the Koopalings being Bowser's kids, biological or adopted. It doesn't really add anything to me and just complicates Bowser and Bowser Jr.'s relationship to them in a way that I just don't like. I get them originally being introduced as such, but with the current setup of the franchise, having Bowser Jr. be an only child and heir to the throne is just better with Mario's proclivity towards simple storytelling. And adding 7 characters to that dynamic in such a way just overcomplicates it and wouldn't have enough room to have them shine in such a role, in my opinion. I see where this one's coming from. I really do, especially with a cast that's just so massive. Mario is such a huge cast of characters, so especially when you're trying to have like that father-son dynamic with Bowser and Bowser Jr. having those 7 extra characters kind of thrown on there just kind of makes it feel a little less personal. I can definitely understand that. But at the same time, I like how the Koopalings sort of influence this narrative that Bowser is a very lonely character at heart, and he sort of gathered these people around him, not just because he's evil and his underlings are also evil and just want a big evil guy to follow. They follow him because they genuinely believe in him, and so it turns this sort of lonely character who didn't have a proper family into this massive cohesive family unit. And having sort of the Koopalings be one of the biggest kind of emblems of that, with them being adopted kids, sort of being like a reflection of him when he was younger. He didn't have any kids. He just had his adoptive father, Kamek, or however you want to look at that. It paints this nice picture of him not wanting these Koopalings, these abandoned Koopalings, to be, left to the, same fate that he was as a child. I can understand them not really getting the chance to shine as individuals. They're kind of all sort of grouped together, right? So they don't really have much, personality outside of like a few character traits. So I can understand why they, this person doesn't really see the appeal of just having them around. And, you don't need them to be around all the time, right? I don't think, it wasn't until, Wonder that we got them again. When's the last time they appeared in a mainline game before that? Wasn't it, it was Mario Wii, right? Or whichever of the latest iterations of the Mario Wii game were. But anyways, I see where this comment's coming from. I don't really agree with, them being biological, they not being biological or adopted. I like the idea of them being adopted. I just think it's very cute. But I can definitely see where this person's coming from. I don't want the kidnapping to fully go away because Nintendo has shown that they're capable of making stories where Peach can be kidnapped and still be a prominent character who helps along the way. The trope itself isn't the main issue, it's the execution of that trope, which a lot of Mario games have fallen short in. This one's interesting. I actually like this one a lot, and I actually agree with this quite a bit. I think there's been this shift in sort of portraying damsels in distress, because that used to be a you couldn't escape that trope, back in the day. That used to be everywhere. And I think, with shifting and, the shifts in culture and opinions and new generation takes and whatnot has sort of portrayed this idea that the trope itself is bad. Having there's something wrong with a female character being captured and then waiting for a righteous male hero to save the day and save them, right? I think that's sort of been not blacklisted, but it's become exhausting as a trope, because it was everywhere. Mario did it, Zelda did it, Sonic did it once, but we try not to talk about that. It was everywhere. So I can understand why, especially Mario fans have gotten sort of tired of this trope just kind of being everywhere and are kind of happy that it's sort of moved away in more recent games. Like, because, fans of Princess Peach want to see Princess Peach do cool things, right? That's why she became like a karate master in the Mario movie. But this person does bring up a good point that even though Peach can be captured, that doesn't mean that ruins the potential for good stories. Mario Galaxy, everyone loves Mario Galaxy, everyone loves Mario Odyssey, but those are all games that had Princess Peach as the damsel in distress and Mario had to save her. Again, it was just the exhaustion of it, like it was every game, which is, I think, why people kind of lean towards the RPGs and other, like, secondary games more, because a lot of the times Peach is either an active character alongside Mario, or the kidnapping stuff is just not nearly as prominent. It happens like maybe once at the beginning of one of the RPGs, and then Mario saves her immediately. But I do think this person has a good point that, like, Nintendo still probably has the capacity to tell interesting stories with this setup. If you've been doing this for like 40 years, well's probably run dry at this point, but I still think there's something you can do. I like Bowser as the villain in almost every Mario game, but I also get tired of it, so I want Mario by himself to face powerful, godly beings and forces of nature without the need of power-ups like how Sonic and Kirby do, and want Nintendo to make statements on those beings in games, on what happens in them and how strong and powerful those beings are. And I want Mario and Luigi's Firebrand and Thunderhand to return in mainline games and be forever permanent. Okay, so I don't really agree with this one in certain ways. I do agree with, I would like a Firebrand and Thunderhand to be kind of brought up a bit more, because, in Superstar Saga, that was freaking awesome having Mario and Luigi having the fire and lightning abilities, but I feel like this take is from the perspective of someone who wants Mario to become Goku, right? Or become Superman, because he's basically describing the plot of a Kirby game, and it just feels very not Mario, right? This feels like a take from the perspective of a power scaler, because it's like, yeah, I want Mario by himself to fight these godlike beings, and also I want the game to expressly state how strong those beings are, so I can brag about how strong Mario is. I'm not saying that's what this guy's doing, but that's what it feels like to me. I do agree that I think Nintendo should try implementing kind of newer villains for Mario. It doesn't always have to be the mainline games. The RPGs, that's why I like the RPGs so much. They always have, like, cool, unique villains. But, I can understand going through, 40 years worth of mainline games and Bowser more often than not always being the main villain. I'd like to see Wario being the main villain again. I think that'd be interesting, but I don't really need them to be like gods or forces of nature, right? I just feel like that's kind of silly and would be not necessarily jumping the shark, because Mario and Luigi, they've fought crazy stuff like that before, but I don't know. I feel like when you phrase it like that, it just seems kind of strange and not really, it doesn't really feel like Mario to me, but there are some good takes kind of sprinkled in, like, more villains besides Bowser and the Firebrand and Thunderhand being a mainline thing. That, I think that'd be cool. Brothership has a better story than Super Paper Mario. This one's interesting. I think this is probably the hottest take on this list, but unfortunately, so there's an issue with this one. This is where I'm gonna kind of out myself as a fake fan. I have never finished a Paper Mario game. I know that it's probably going to be shocking. I never really got into them. I started playing the original Paper Mario, but I lost access to that save file, and I cannot finish it. I think I own Super Paper Mario. It's somewhere in my collection of Wii games, I'm sure. This is not saying I don't want to play them. I do very much want to play them. They are held with such reverence, especially like Thousand Year Door and I think Super Paper Mario. I think people used to not like it, but I think people have come around to it. I have played Brothership. I haven't beaten it yet because that game is so freaking long. But just going off of kind of what Mr. Shaman here is saying, his argument is that it actually makes uses of Mario and Luigi as brothers, and a lot of the theming kind of revolves around that. And I do agree. From what I've played of the game, it definitely seems to lean into that. There's this big theme of like duos and siblings, and just kind of the idea of bonds in general, and the entire story revolves around that. And there's a lot of different like perspectives from different characters, and the main villain's MacGuffin, it strips away people's drive to make connections with people. Was it the glop? It's some goofy name, but like the weird essence or energy that they use to like strip away the will to make connections with people, which is a very Mario thing. I haven't beaten it yet. I keep getting sidetracked. There's so many games coming out recently that it's just been flashbanging me with so many things. But I can definitely see where this person's coming from, and especially I can't comment too much on Super Paper Mario because, again, I haven't played it, I haven't finished it. I want to play it, I'll get to it eventually, but I see where this person's coming from. I think I feel like this is a very interesting discussion that I just don't have the knowledge to have at this point, but I just wanted to highlight it because I thought it was interesting anyway. New Super Mario Bros. Wii is the best looking version of that art style. I don't know if you mean just like the Mario art style in general or specifically the like modern 2D platforming, because if we're including all the 2D platforming games, I don't think anything's ever touched Mario Wonder. Mario Wonder is like some of the best this franchise has ever looked. I love how vibrant all the colors are. I love how all the characters look. I love just the aesthetic of it. It's incredible. I love that game so much. I don't feel like people talked about it much. I mean, I know it got nominated for Game of the Year, but I adore Mario Wonder so much. It's one of my favorite Mario games now. I don't think anything has ever come close to like matching just the vibrancy of all the worlds and the colors and the characters. It's brilliant stuff. So yeah, I don't know if this person's talking about like just the Mario art style in general or just the new Mario Brothers art style. Because if we're talking specifically like just the new Mario Brothers line of games, then yeah, sure. I mean, there's only so many of them. There's like 3 or 4 different iterations of like that sort of style of game. So yeah, I can see that. I know people. I used to play New Mario Bros. Wii a lot. It's been a while though. I kind of forgot about a lot of it, but I have a soft spot for the DS version. I think the DS version is quite good. I do hope we get a Mario game that focuses on the Star Children again. It's a one-off thing, but I think the implications about why these 7 were chosen have so much potential. This one's interesting. I made that whole video about the Star Children. That's like, I think that's my most viewed video now. Or is it the Marvel Rivals one? I'll have to check later. But I'm a big fan of the Star Children. I think it's really interesting to have this sort of higher powered or whatever it may be, kind of like bring this small collection of characters together and sort of have this sort of core that sort of represents kind of the different corners of the Mario franchise. Because of course you got Mario and Luigi, got Peach and Bowser, then you also got Wario, DK, and Yoshi that sort of make up the other different spin-off areas of the Mario universe. And I think that's very interesting. I get a lot of comments, I've noticed this recently, that I get a lot of comments of people saying like Yoshi's Island DS, it was made by not an in-house company in Nintendo, therefore it's not canon, which I think is incredibly silly, because by that logic, the Mario DS games, like the Mario and Luigi RPGs, those were made by Alpha Dream. Paper Mario games, I don't think those were made by an in-house company. So does that just mean that anything that's not made strictly by in-house Nintendo is considered non-canon? That's silly. We're getting rid of like a majority of this character's history. Just feels very strange to me to just completely disregard any game that's not made by Nintendo in-house. But yeah, I think it would be interesting if they tried to approach that concept again. I don't know if they ever will. I know, I've the comic videos that I am working on those. I know it's been a bit, but I am working on it. I have plans for the Star Children. I'm not sure what yet, but I know I want them to come into play at some point. Not immediately, but at some point in the story that I want to create. I want the Star Children to have some sort of influence or impact on the story. But I agree with this comment that I think it would be interesting to see the Star Children again. I just don't know when or how. I would prefer that the Mario movies were made by DreamWorks instead of Illumination. I feel like DreamWorks can give these movies a nice paced runtime with a story and character arcs that can get you invested, while also staying true to the world of Mario. What Illumination is doing is fine, but they really need to do better with the story, characters, especially the pacing. I do agree with this, I think, mostly just because DreamWorks has a better track record of creating kids movies that can also have very mature themes and storytelling, and also just like good writing. I had that whole tangent in my Mario Galaxy video, because DreamWorks, they've created stuff like Kung Fu Panda, How to Train Your Dragon, Megamind, all great franchises that were designed for kids, but they also have very mature, open, genuine storytelling, right? It wasn't made to continue a brand. It wasn't made to create a marketable IP. They were made to tell a good story, right? And I think that's something that Illumination has always lacked, especially with like the Minion stuff, because the first Despicable Me was great, and then they kept making them, and then they kept focusing on the minions, which were the least interesting part. You know what's bad when, like, you've been around for, like, what, 10, 15 years, and your best movie after your first one is a movie based off of one of the most profitable IPs on the planet, right? Is that to say that DreamWorks would make a better movie than what Illumination can do? Probably, but I still feel like it would face some of the same problems. I know I made a comment about how I think DreamWorks would have been a better pick, and I still do think that, simply just because I think they just have more talented writers in that company, I guess. But I think half of the issue is just Nintendo. Because a lot of the issues with Pokemon was that they had these, like, corporate mandates that sort of weakened a lot of their more recent games. And I feel like the same would be happening here, since Nintendo has a very strict way in that they view their characters and have this, like, a very rigid status quo that they sort of have to keep to. Because, you know, Mario is a brand, right? They care more about the brand than still telling a good story, at least in this very specific circumstance, right? So I feel like even if they did get DreamWorks instead of Illumination, I feel like it would still suffer from a couple of the issues that Illumination was struggling with. Not to say that I think Illumination would make a better product if they didn't have whatever mandates I'm hypothesizing. Probably yes, but not by much, just because I just don't think they're very good at making, like, solid, good stories. But yeah, that's just me. All right, let's end this one off with a scorcher. This one's fun. Daisy is honestly highly overrated, and her fans made it worse. I agree from an objective lens that I think Daisy is very highly praised. Probably more so than I think she deserves. Not to say that she doesn't deserve attention and praise, because I think she's a good character, but I think a lot of the attention that is given to her could be given to other characters. And I do think that a lot of her fans have sort of made this character more annoying to sort of hear about, because Daisy, I think, having such a spunky personality can open itself up to being overly mischaracterized. Not to say that her being a tomboy is not part of her character, but I think very similarly to how Percy Jackson fans like to flanderize Percy's sassiness or his sort of insecurities, I think a lot of Mario fans like to overly flanderize Daisy's competitiveness and sort of bubbliness, and turn what was originally a very just a very competitive, extroverted young woman into gaslight gatekeep girl boss, right? Basically, how people view Daisy is basically how Princess Peach in the movies was written. And, it's not entirely accurate to how she's portrayed in the games, and I'm not really a fan of people taking one aspect of a character and basically making that their entire thing. And I also don't like how people act like she's the only one with personality. They sort of take Daisy's sort of tomboyishness and use it as an excuse to throw shade at Peach and slander her character. Just because a character isn't constantly screaming and punching people and, expressing themselves openly and extrovertedly, just because a character's not doing that, that means they have a weaker characterization. I've always found that kind of silly and a very strange excuse to, like, dog on Peach. It's very similar to, how people frame Mario and Luigi, which I've talked about that before, especially since I feel like the era that Daisy really was what fans portray her as was a very small piece of her history, because when she was first introduced in Mario Tennis, she was very much just a second Peach. But then the GameCube era and Wii era came out, and she was very much kind of what people think of when they think of Daisy now. And then nowadays, she's just sort of a shell of herself. Like in the most recent sport games, she's just kind of like, it feels like she's going through the motions and not actually, like, being herself, if that makes sense. That's an issue with a lot of more modern Mario sport games, but that's a different issue. And there's also, like, the arguments with, like, oh, she and Luigi have much more chemistry, even though that chemistry kind of boils down to one statue in a Mario Kart track, and then maybe, like, a couple of cutscenes they share, compared to Mario and Peach's quite literally, like, 40 years of history and chemistry and scenes they share together. I just always thought that was very strange. But, that doesn't mean that I hate Daisy. I actually quite like Daisy. I think she's definitely my least favorite of the princesses, but that's just because I like Peach and Rosalina just so much more. I adore those characters. And I think the sort of Daisy hype train has died down a little bit, or at the very least, I don't see much of it anymore. And I can definitely understand how rabid fans can sort of push you away from a character. That's happened to me with Luigi and Waluigi. You know, I still love Luigi and Waluigi, but Mario fans are definitely guilty of overly flanderizing one character for the purpose of putting down another. And I just think that's really stupid, and I don't feel like we should be treating these characters and using them as, like, weapons to put down characters or communities that we don't like. Whew, alright, that was a lot. I think this... Yeah, I'm looking at the recording now. This is like twice as long as the original one. So thank you for everyone who put in requests or put in your takes. I'd love to make this kind of a reoccurring series, you know, every like few months or so, or maybe if there's any other franchises you'd like me to sort of revolve one of these around, like maybe Sonic or maybe not Marvel. Percy Jackson, maybe. I've made a few videos on Percy Jackson. I'd love to, anyone who has any of those hot takes, that'd be kind of funny. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for participating in this little experiment here. I'll see you guys in the next one.